Verna is walking in the crowded city when someone speaks to him. It's the hero, who is hooded and dreaming about the young man, questioning what he is doing there. The hero and the Viscount go to a tavern to drink beer together. They toast to their safe return. The hero, Mazel, says that place suits him more than the ones he has been frequenting, and Verna agrees, saying everyone has their weaknesses and strengths. When the MC met the hero, he thought he was the type of person he would never get involved with. But life is unpredictable. Being in that world, in that reality, is the greatest proof that it's impossible to predict life's next step. Verna was once a normal man from Japan who was in a common family and conventional jobs until one day he reincarnated in that medieval continent. He not only reincarnated in another world but in a game he knew. It was an RPG where the hero faced the demon lord, but he couldn't rush because there was a big problem from the middle to the end of the game. Someone was working under the demon lord's commands and would destroy the royal capital. At that moment, the hero would prepare for the story's end. All that tragedy would happen right where he reincarnated. In the end, he reincarnated into a random family that wasn't even mentioned in the game, which meant he would probably die easily. For this reason, Verna dedicated his life to learning martial arts and being able to protect himself. Eventually, he joined the Royal Academy, located in the capital, where he met a friendly blonde boy. At the academy, Verna stands out as one of the best students since he dedicated his life to his survival. Even being a standout thanks to his family, the MC has eyes for someone even more popular than him. The most mentioned at the academy is the hero Mazel, who is the most important character in the story. The MC never imagined he would be classmates with that guy. The hero being at that academy means the game is about to start. To not interfere or change the course of the game, Verna positioned himself as an invisible and ordinary person. This means he really didn't want to get involved in the whole situation. In the school's tea room, the MC observes a girl who is the daughter of a duke from the neighboring continent. He is interested in girls like her, who like to be around handsome men, but something strange is happening. The boy doesn't know what that girl is hiding, but the sweet she recommended the hero eat doesn't seem safe. Even so, Verna has no intention of getting involved. After all, it's not like something would happen to the hero right after the game starts. But suddenly, Mazel seems terrible. The only possible conclusion is that he ate what he shouldn't have, and Verna doesn't understand where the bodyguards who always stay by his side are. The MC gets up agitated. If something happens to the hero, no one else will be able to defeat the demon lord, so Verna decides to intervene. Approaching Mazel, the young man says he can help him in the academy's infirmary. The people around are startled by Verna's appearance, and the MC apologizes but says he had to interrupt that conversation to help his classmate. The spoiled Duchess says the young man is her responsibility, and she will find a good doctor for him. However, he says they don't have time for that, and Mazel needs to be helped as soon as possible. For this reason, he believes the young man will be better cared for in the academy's infirmary. The people supporting that Duchess are outraged with the MC. Even so, Verna picks up Mazel in his arms and takes him away from there. Judging by the reaction of the people left behind, capturing the hero was their goal, and the MC doesn't know what to do in that situation. Later, in the infirmary, the boy argues with some guys because they left the hero hanging. Verna takes advantage of their nervousness about the situation and sends one to talk to the professor and another to look for the little Duchess. Both leave there frightened. Opening the curtain and looking at Mazel unconscious, the MC concludes that it could have been disastrous. Verna should have intervened earlier. He worries that Mazel might not be well enough to defeat the demons and save the world. If things continue as they are, there's a chance the hero's path could be altered, and he might not fulfill his mission. Mazel wakes up confused. The MC hands him a glass of water and says he was poisoned, so he needs to rest a bit. Verna explains that the sweet the little Duchess served was poisoned, and he only survived because he drank an antidote right after. The hero is outraged and questions how that could happen inside the academy. Indignant about the situation, the MC says the girl even tried to kidnap him, and things could escalate quickly to an unpleasant situation. The boy explains the disastrous situation that was about to happen, and the hero starts laughing. Mazel remembers Verna and knows he is from a noble family, and also his classmate, whom he wanted to talk to before. The situation starts to get awkward, and the MC tells him to shut up and go rest to see if he gets better. Suddenly, a noise occurs, and a bunch of big guys enter the infirmary asking who Verna is and saying they will occupy that place now. Closing the curtain of Mazel's bed, the MC says there's a student resting there and asks everyone to keep quiet. Observing the situation, Verna notes that no matter what he says, that brute will look for a fight. Considering his physique, there's no chance that guy studies there. Besides, he's not even trying to hide that he's a state or guild contractor. He's trying to intimidate the boy and will say something like, Mazel is the state's responsibility. Acting quickly, Verna hits the guy in the face with a piece of wood. He does it because he needs to protect the hero, but also because that giant is very suspicious. Of course, in terms of physique and numbers, they have the advantage. The MC's goal is to hold the fort until more help arrives. Unexpectedly, the hero kicks one of the guys in the face. Mazel enters a fight, scaring everyone there. In the end, Verna has to admit that the hero is incredible. After defeating the enemies, Mazel gives a big smile and asks if he's okay. The MC says he's fine since the guy dealt with all the enemies. It's amazing how the hero can do all that even weakened by poison. For Verna, it's a relief that the hero helped him resolve that situation. Now he can take a deep breath to think about how to explain everything to a professor. In desperation, a professor enters the infirmary asking what happened there and if they did it. The MC tries to explain that those guys don't seem to be academy students. Moreover, the two of them were attacked by those brutes. Apparently, someone planned all that, but Verna doesn't know the motivations. The MC tells the professor to try to resolve the situation before those guys wake up, and the old man orders them to call the other professors quickly. As a result of the whole situation, the hero's assistants changed. Quickly, they called the MC to take on this role, but the boy tried to refuse. However, before he realized it, Mazel was behind him, inviting him to events. It wasn't an option to refuse Mazel's invitations since he is so important, and he told himself it was part of the game's progression, so he agreed. After that, they became not only friends, but the best company for each other and spent their academy time always together. Then, the game finally began, and demons started appearing everywhere. Mazel was pushed to his limit to fight, and Verna told him that if they live in a world that expects him to sacrifice himself, then he will change that himself. Some time ago, an ordinary worker like the MC woke up in the body of a child in a world that belonged to a game he had played before. It was an RPG where a hero faced the demon lord, but there was a problem there. He had reincarnated in the body of an ordinary person who would die in the massacre that would happen later, but it wasn't Verna's intention to die that way. Luckily, he reincarnated before the game effectively started and knew what was coming, so he trained day after day to get stronger. For whatever reason, the main character liked him. At first, he did everything he could to not interfere with the course of history, but he ended up becoming friends with the hero. Moreover, somehow, the protagonist always found himself in some kind of trouble. Faced with this, Verna changed his mind and decided to help the hero with whatever he needed until he fulfilled his final destiny. After years, the game was finally about to begin. At that moment, MC starts to get nervous when he notices what is about to happen. A kind of teacher explains about monsters and how it is possible to prevent disasters if you deal with them early or enough. However, Verna knows that those monsters are not ordinary, as their strength and frequency of appearance are influenced by the reincarnation of the demon lord. All the knights of the capital will be defeated in that fateful event. By that time, they are fighting a battle that is already lost, and those with a noble rank will go home to await the next orders. The teacher gives some vague instructions, and the MC reflects that Mazel will do something about the students. But the royal knights will not have a good final fate. As a member of the royal family, he will have to go to the battlefield, and his chance of success is very low. Therefore, he needs to think of a plan to get out of this alive. Suddenly, Mazel shouts for Verna, who was so immersed in his thoughts that he missed the fact that the break had started. Worried, he quickly stands up, saying he needs to go home, and Mazel protests because he had promised to accompany him to buy a sword. Leaving there, the MC says he will recruit people and get supplies, but the hero does not understand why he is so worried about those little monsters. Mazel decides to follow his friend, but he is soon dismissed because Verna is from a noble family, and they must follow different paths. Putting his arm around Mazel's shoulder, the MC says the boy will be fine and just needs to follow what he must and not let his guard down. That battle will end when the hero faces the demons. His mission there is to save the world. Before moving away from his friend, Verna tells him not to forget to carry plenty of medicine and dress appropriately, but Mazel thinks that is an exaggeration. Another person approaches them and asks what he is going to do. He is worried, and the situation seems quite tense in his mind, but Mazel is calm. Some girls approach, asking what the hero thinks they should do, and he gives some vague tips. His final recommendation is that everyone keeps their armor ready in case it is needed. Verna observes that the hero has memorized the skills of all his colleagues, and this creates a certain intimacy between them. That world has its own skill system, just like in the game. In the case of the MC, he acquired spear skills, thanks to his hard work. Meanwhile, Mazel's skill is called the hero. This allows him to use almost any type of skill in battle, while Verna had to sacrifice a lot to acquire his skill. There is no doubt that Mazel's skill is almost like a cheat. The first event will increase the hero's experience on the battlefield, and Verna was planning to make him use his skills to the fullest. Meanwhile, the MC's goal is just to survive that. Before moving away, he shouts to his friend not to forget the medicine, and Mazel agrees. In the name of his survival, he needs to do whatever is necessary. Upon returning to contact his family, Verna discovers that his father will stand by the king during the battle. In the end, it is obvious that he would not be on the front line since he is a count of that continent. The old man explains to Verna that he was appointed as the commander of his family's troop, and the MC is indignant with that kind of decision. Then, the old man explains that at that moment, Mr. Max is in command. The goal is to make it clear that the count's family is actively participating on the front line. But the MC knows that this is not a conventional battle. So, he asks the butler to call Max. Then, Verna says he is going out to buy supplies. He does not know his limits of lying, but this is a matter of life and death. He will sacrifice as much as possible to get out of that war alive. In the battle, things are hectic. There are about 4,200 soldiers in total, where 200 are mercenaries and 100 students from the support team. No one there knows that this is a lost battle, but there are a lot of people there. Commander Max Lyman observes that there are too many people for such a small battle. Verna already expected that kind of reaction. For that grumpy knight, this is just another everyday battle. Citizens were supposed to represent only 4 or 5 people, but the MC insisted on calling 100, which seems excessive from an outside perspective. However, from his perspective, it's just about being cautious, and he's lucky that everyone there listens to him. The leader of the first platoon, Augen, observes that the MC is being very careful for his first battle. The leaders of that war are the heirs to the crown. Despite being heirs to the throne, the prediction is that both will die at the beginning of the game. It is this event that causes the hero to start a mission almost immediately. To avoid chaos, the MC's goal is to try to help them survive. Max approaches Verna and asks him to say a few words to the men present. His family and the other supporting family are practically opposites, but they unite in times of war. Verna knows he has no choice and asks Max to accompany him. When the MC meets the leader of the other family, he is surprised that the Count's son is there. The stern-looking man tells Max to take good care of Verna. At that moment, the MC realizes that he is a very insignificant piece there. For the other military family, Max is much more important in the end. Suddenly, Tyrone, the eldest son of the enemy family, approaches covered in armor and asks why Verna's family doesn't follow his father. Basically, Tyrone is trying to insinuate that Verna's army is a failure. From their perspective, the warning they are giving is like a favor. The second daughter of the family, Hermine, approaches asking if Tyrone knows that it is not possible, but she looks at Verna and says that since he is still a student, he should hide to protect himself behind them. The MC bows and thanks for the consideration. Hermine's father says she is right, and they shouldn't push themselves too hard because the battlefield can be a bit dangerous. Apparently, none of them are planning to rely on Verna's army at the beginning. Before the MC leaves, the man recommends that he be careful not to disappoint his father. When Verna leaves, Hermine tells Tyrone that he spoke a bit exaggeratedly. The boy's father says that Verna is not just any boy, but rather a standout in his class, and Tyrone acknowledges that the boy is the only one in his family who knows martial arts. Even so, it's a shame that he's just a spear warrior. For him, someone who fights with a spear is not even considered a knight, and he wonders who will be the heir to the Count's family if Verna ends up dying in battle. The MC meets again with those fighting for his family. Max comments that the boy seems very tired, even though the battle hasn't started yet, and the MC tries to give the impression that everything is fine. The military organization that Verna has is quite efficient. There are 3 groups, divided into 5 groups, each with a leader, which helps in the order-giving system. Verna tells the soldiers not to forget to always act as one organism on the battlefield. They are indignant with the whole speech the guy is making. The boy says he understands the fact that they think it's unnecessary for ordinary monsters. Even so, he doesn't want to have unnecessary losses. All the care he is taking is so that the people there return home alive. Despite this, Verna knows that it's much easier said than done. They will need to face those monsters until Mazel defeats the final boss. Far away, Mazel is full of life potions, and his colleagues are amazed at his caution. The hero knows he took as much as he could, but since the MC spoke so decisively to take as much as he could, something must be happening. Mazel wonders what is going through Verna's mind at that moment. The MC's plan is to keep the situation under control, and for that, he wants 5 people to face each monster simultaneously. When they finish with an enemy in front of them, they should help whoever is closest. The leader of one of the platoons says he doesn't understand that type of order from Verna. So, the MC tries to explain that he is just looking for a way to battle more efficiently. The army remains confused anyway, In a world like that, individual strength is placed above anything else, and for them, that type of plan might sound strange. Even so, it is a very atypical situation. So, he uses as an excuse that the prince is on the battlefield for the first time, and they need to be cautious. The MC takes the opportunity to mention that he doesn't know how strong the monsters will be, or how many there will be. Additionally, they may keep appearing one after another. The second platoon leader confirms that if their stamina runs out and the monsters keep appearing, they might have a problem. Verna says that, given the circumstances, her plan is the best option for them and gives them the greatest chance of victory. Before the battle begins, the MC takes the opportunity to say that, if necessary, they should also assist other families. The men start discussing whether this is really necessary and tease each other about a possible romantic interest in Hermina. When the enemies start to approach, Verna shouts for the soldiers to take their positions. The entire atmosphere is different. The battle gained a new perspective in just a few moments after the conversation. Just as the MC remembered from the game, the knights are defeated. The number of deaths only increases, and those who are alive panic. Meanwhile, the MC's squad seems to be cooperating well with each other. They created an efficient system where injured people are not sent to the battlefield and stay behind, protected. As the monsters keep appearing one after another, the MC cannot afford to wipe his face or think too much. In the end, all the training that Verna took the trouble to do is serving a purpose. He shouts orders to his soldiers, telling them how to act on the battlefield. The young man is very happy that his soldiers are following exactly what he suggested. Now they just need to keep the situation under control until Mazel defeats the final boss. Even so, the situation is tense, and many soldiers are starting to flee the battle. His squad doesn't affect the entire battle in the end. Of course, they have a significant number of people, but it's nothing compared to the rest. The enemies that reach Verna's squad are already filtered and fewer in number. It would be the end for him if the front squads were defeated. Verna considers sending reinforcements, but the family in front of him is very proud of their military prowess and might just refuse the help. Max and he dialogue during the battle to try to organize things. The MC tries to help whoever he can, until he encounters someone from the other family and asks how things are going, but he doesn't know what to say. Then, Verna asks for him to be taken off the battlefield and for his wounds to be treated. It's frightening that even such a well-equipped soldier ends up in that state. The MC doesn't know if he should send reinforcements or wait for the situation to worsen even more. It's not Verna's intention to waste his men due to a small mistake. The boy concludes that as long as there are people fighting, they will try to focus on their power, so he asks one of his leaders to go after the family ahead. Meanwhile, at the front of the battlefield, this family fights tirelessly, but things are different from usual, and those monsters are acting strangely. Despite the soldiers doing well, the slaves are overcome with fear. Many are running from the battle in terror. The grumpy one asks where Tyrone and Hermine are. A soldier says they went to the front line but haven't returned yet. Worried about the battle, the man shouts that they need to reform the squad to continue the battle in the center of the field. Hermine hears her father's voice from afar but doesn't understand what he means. Apparently, they have strayed too far from the troops. The situation is starting to get dangerous, and maybe they should go back. She looks to the side and her brother is down. Hermine saves Tyrone from dying and asks if the young man is okay. The young man says the situation is completely out of control, and they need to go to their father to try to resolve the situation. Even experienced soldiers with incredible equipment are losing the battle. Hermine shouts for those who can walk to follow her. They will get out of there and return to their father once and for all. But a soldier looks ahead and asks how she plans to do that if they are surrounded by monsters. Hermine shouts for them not to be distressed and not to separate for anything. She doesn't know what to do, but she understands that if they do nothing, they will die. At that moment, they need to focus on annihilating as many enemies as possible. The girl fights as best as she can until she finds herself cornered and on the brink of death. Suddenly, someone defeats the monster in front of her and saves her. The leader of the MC's second platoon approaches and introduces himself as Barcy, saying he came to help her on Verna's orders. The woman is outraged at how those soldiers can be so powerful and are handling a situation that even she couldn't manage. She questions Barcy about how they managed to do all that, and the man says they are just following Verna's orders. Additionally, the other injured nobles were under their care and are being treated. Then, the squad leader tells her that it might be a good idea for them to retreat for a while. The woman reflects that this is a shame for her family, but in the current situation, it's the only chance they have to live, so she says she will talk to her father while Barcy takes care of the rear. Meanwhile, the MC is holding the fort, as the enemies so far are weak, but if that changes, things could get ugly. Therefore, Mazel needs to defeat the boss as soon as possible. While Verna reflects, someone shouts that they have won. The soldiers are happy and say that the enemies are retreating and their efforts were not in vain. That can only mean they won and Mazel defeated the final boss. But the MC knows that if it were that easy, the soldiers wouldn't have been annihilated in the game. Therefore, it means something else is happening. Worried, Verna shouts for Max and tells them to give healing potions to the wounded soldiers and send them back to the battlefield. The man tries to argue, but the MC is already decided. Everyone celebrates the great victory, and Max questions what the next step will be. Meanwhile, Verna observes that this is very strange and doesn't match the RPG's story. Apparently, the monsters fled to the forests. Verna runs from there to try to communicate with the allies. He runs as fast as he can over monster fluids and battle comrades. The boy is already completely exhausted. Now, Verna questions why he is running so fast since what is going to happen seems inevitable. He is the only one who knows the fate of everyone there. Upon reaching the prince's camp, Verna is stopped by his security, who say he needs authorization from the first commander. Staying there trying to convince those guards is a waste of time and will cause everyone to die. He needs to think of something quick and efficient. At that point, everyone thinks they have won the battle, and then Verna has an idea and shouts to His Highness that he needs to tell him something. The grumpy blonde looks at that filthy boy down there. The guards are outraged, and the prince questions who he is. The men say he is an aristocrat, but they will soon send him away. The man orders them to let Verna in and says that his combat team suffered a lot of damage, so the boy must have something useful to say. The MC kneels before the man, who asks who he is. Quickly, Verna states his family's name. The man observes that the boy is the minister's son and says the boy seems to be an excellent knight despite his age. Concerned about the whole situation, Verna apologizes for being rude and says His Highness needs to have the soldiers retreat. Everyone looks at him as if he's crazy, and the boy begins to realize that he probably can't help those soldiers. Even though he knows what happens in the game, it doesn't seem possible to change fate. But the monarch asks Verna why he made that suggestion. The MC explains that the enemy's movement is strange. All the monsters started to move away, even the insects, which seem to have no intelligence. It means they are not scared and fleeing, but it's a trap to catch the knights in the forest. Most enemies can move easily in this territory, but the soldiers with heavy armor cannot. His Highness listens to the boy and shouts to gather the soldiers who had gone towards the forest as soon as possible. Then, he asks if Verna has anything else to say, and the boy apologizes for his imprudence. Then, the MC says that the prince's son should be protected in the capital. The man agrees. After all, the boy is not yet of age to witness such a war, and it's not worth destroying the king's legacy. Having finished making his requests, the man asks him to return there with his soldiers because he wishes to keep him nearby. Verna returns, and Max asks how the meeting went. The boy says he spoke with His Highness and explains what was requested of him. Even Max is impressed with the boy's ability to speak directly with the monarch. The MC doesn't understand the emotion, but Max is very happy because it is an honor. A soldier announces that Miss Hermine has just arrived. She approaches, apologizing for being rude, but wants to speak privately with Verna. Quickly, the MC explains the prince's orders. The girl is surprised that the young man managed to speak directly with such an important person. First of all, she says she would like to apologize for being rude to him before the battle and thank him for his care. Without Verna's team's help, she wouldn't have survived. He doesn't know how to react to that, but Hermine is quicker and says she has a request for him. She wants the boy to help with tactics during the war. That makes the MC quite tense because the girl is too close. Later, he gathers at the military center. Verna is exhausted just from having to move back and forth, and Max asks him to rest a bit. The captain is quite surprised that the boy has so much skill in battle and can devise such efficient techniques. Deep down, the MC knows he can only do that because of his knowledge from a past life. A man in armor approaches and says he has orders from His Highness. That soldier shouts that Verna has received the power and authority to lead all the troops and prepare them for the enemy attack. The boy's soldiers start celebrating and congratulating him while he tries to process what's happening. That leaves Verna confused because, after all, he is very young and just a student. His men agree that it's normal for him to be nervous, but the boy has to admit he had the best reaction in that condition. All of this worries him because it seems like they're placing a lot of expectations on him. The truth is that the boy only knows privileged information and can calculate things carefully, but he doesn't know how useful that can be in real combat. After taking a breath, Verna concludes that no matter how tired he is, he can't afford to rest because he needs to resolve that battle first. The idea now is to hold the line while Mazel resolves everything and hopes it ends as soon as possible. Meanwhile, far away, the hero is defeating monsters with his companions, and everyone is happy that he has such a large set of healing potions. The young man reveals that he only brought all that because Verna, his friend, asked him to. At first, Mazel was nervous about the whole situation, but Verna encouraged him and told him to be himself. A girl in the group asks who this boy is and if he's an aristocrat. The hero confirms but says that despite being a bit of a bourgeois, Verna is a good person. The girl is worried and says that the soldiers seem to be struggling a bit in the battle, but Mazel is confident in his friend. His colleague is very intelligent and amazing, and besides, he can stay calm and think of good strategies. One of Mazel's companions says that for the sake of the young man's friend, they must find the evil leader soon. Suddenly, they are attacked by something unknown. The woman representing the boss of that battle appears, saying it's a pleasure to meet that human. On the battlefield, Verna's strategies are being efficient, and all the soldiers are ready to follow them to the letter. The rest have already left the danger zone, and those who were injured have returned to the capital with the king's grandson. Max approaches the young man and says that thanks to him, they seem to be avoiding the worst. The enemy's trap failed, and the next move will probably be a real war. Although the main unit is ready to escape quickly, the prince doesn't seem to want to leave. It's an admirable act on his part not to abandon command, but it's dangerous. A soldier approaches to say that the other units are approaching, and several experienced people from the royalty arrive at him. Even for Verna, it's strange that a student is commanding such relevant people. Max observes that this time, the MC was appointed by the crown itself to command. Although those soldiers are from bourgeois families, they don't have titles on their own. Meanwhile, his family does, so technically, he is at a higher status. A charming blonde approaches and says he heard about Verna's abilities and how he has been handling the battle well. Visibly, that young man has more experience than the boy, and Verna comments that he is only being cautious because it's his first time on the battlefield. In that situation he's in, after receiving an order from the crown, there's no option but to obey. Even so, he doesn't know what the true intentions of those there are. The girl approaches and praises the work Verna is doing in that battle. The third in the group agrees, saying that he is doing a great job on the front line. Everyone there intends to do their best to ensure the battle goes well. Oliver is not a politician, but a mercenary who is acting as the commander of the adventurers and mercenaries of the capital. However, it seems he is loyal and will not flee in that battle. They need to fight together, and the MC plans to do everything possible. Meanwhile, the Fürst family prepares for the battle. According to the message the prince sent, the enemies have increased in number, but they are under control and should attack when they notice the soldiers will not enter the forest. The head of the family explains the battle strategy they must follow to win. At the same time, they are in a moral crisis because that strategy is coming from Verna. Tyrone is throwing a fit, and the leader explains that Verna's tactic seems innovative. In the end, the strategy that the MC brought is the one that offers the best chances of victory for all of them. The situation is not easy for anyone, and everything seems very different from usual. Even the exploration team is facing a striking situation. They wish things weren't happening that way, but there's nothing they can do. Verna observes that the soldiers have finally started to move, so it's time for them to advance. The battle method the MC chose to use is the same as before. The biggest difference is that the number of soldiers has increased considerably under his command. To manage everything, he created more squads and leaders. Things are going very well, but everything is very strange, and the magic is not working as it should because the enemies are disappearing long before catching fire. Despite everyone admiring Verna for the success in battle, the boy greatly admires His Highness. A soldier from the Second Order of Knights named Waktel approaches Verna, and the MC asks if something is wrong. The man says he is there to seek instructions from the young man about what to do and how to move. Verna says the goal is to cooperate. Our hero takes the opportunity to ask how the situation is, and Waktel explains that, although there are some injured, it's nothing that hinders the general movement. Giving the final order, Verna asks the soldier to move his subordinates to the right team. He says he will stay there taking care of the prince. Waktel does not seem happy with that decision and asks if the young man is too tired to fight. Of course, as he is a knight of the Second Order, his mission is to protect the prince, and it is difficult to leave him behind. It would be a big problem if the prince ended up losing his life in that battle, and they don't have many options. Verna says he doesn't know if there is a unit capable of helping them that way at that moment, so they need to do it. The MC has already decided that if the man refuses to obey, he will have to advance on his own. But Waktel bows and thanks for the orders. In the end, Verna's words greatly motivated that knight who advances to where he was requested. Max approaches the MC asking if something happened. The captain is all covered in blood and looks exhausted. Verna explains that the goal now is to send a team to support the central unit. Quickly, Max understands that the goal is to protect the prince at all costs. Even he recognizes that Verna is acting very intelligently for a boy of his age. The MC's goal is to stay behind and try to escape if everything goes wrong with Mazel, but now they think he wants to use his body as a shield for the prince. Anyway, this is not the time to think about how people interpreted what he said. The boy shouts to Max that they need to push the enemy back and then prepare to protect the prince. Meanwhile, Mazel's expedition is trying to deal with the boss. Apparently, no matter how many attacks they make on the enemy, she will recover quickly. A man asks if Mazel is tired, and the boy says he's fine. The group is trying to figure out the best way to deal with that enemy since she can regenerate rate immediately. The girl in the group decides to advance quickly on the enemy and is happy because she has plenty of recovery medicine thanks to Verna. Mazel observes that everyone is tired, but thanks to the potions, they seem to continue strong. He needs to somehow get through that situation. Even so, he is not as smart as his friend. The hero remembers that the MC told him not to despair, just to be himself. He needs to look carefully and think deeply. Then, Mazel has an incredible insight and shouts to his team. On the battlefield, Degenkolb is impressed that the MC wants to accompany the prince. She believes that the boy's presence there will usher in an era of peace and prosperity. Everyone is impressed with the young man's dedication to establishing good strategies and protecting his highness. People know there is no greater honor than giving one's life to protect royalty. Meanwhile, the MC is giving it his all, but the monsters don't seem to stop appearing. A soldier shouts that the message has been sent to all units, and the boy is happy about it. Now it's time to advance and press the enemies. They run towards all the monsters they can, annihilating them one by one. Verna shouts that they should contact the main unit and tell them to retreat. Only then does the boy realize his voice is getting hoarse. The idea now is to stay where the crown's unit is, so everything should be fine. As Verna is now going to fight in the center, he can only hope the flank doesn't collapse. On the side, the soldiers are defending arduously and trying to press the enemies to retreat. The Fouert family's battle tactics are admirable. The chief commander praises their military organization, but Hermine insists on telling the truth. She comments that the tactic they are executing was suggested by Lord Verna, the Count's son. The mustached dandy asks if the girl is sure of what she's saying, and she confirms. Before Verna was transferred to the central unit, she consulted with him. On that occasion, the young man told her about that tactic. He suggested building a wall of shields to push the enemies back. If the person holding the shield collapses, the entire battle line will too, so only the strongest should hold the shield. From there, it's just a matter of using the enemy's own body to provoke a retreat. The commander observes that Lord Verna seems better than he thought, and a soldier behind him says that's certainly true. Reflectively, the man says he needs to report this to his highness. On the front line, the bravest soldiers shout that they need to be strong and push the enemy as far back as possible. They advance without distinguishing what's ahead. After holding as much as they can, finally the Count's unit arrives. The soldiers quickly pull back, retreating. Verna emerges, advancing and shouting for his subordinates to follow the plan. The soldiers who were holding the line can now rest a bit, and are relieved. They search for Lord Verna in the crowd and identify that the boy is still a student. Everyone believes he is a rare gem and has much to offer in the future. The MC takes a small pause in the battle to drink a healing potion while a soldier explains the situation to him. He goes to Max and says he will stay back a bit, giving instructions to the others. On that occasion, he plans to entrust the front line to his companion. Observing Max, Verna concludes he is a man full of energy, different from all the others. There's a lot of casualness there, and if the healing potion simply disappears, everyone will end up falling out. From then on, he should focus only on fleeing, but he changes his mind, reorganizes the command, and adjusts according to the number of wounded. Verna knows he has to do it, but it's very difficult to give instructions. Moreover, the Imperial Guard is right behind them. On that occasion, the boy is responsible for protecting everyone. The young man's initial plan was to flee far away, but everyone is fighting well. Apparently the battle is stabilizing. The MC calls one of the soldiers to leave a message. It's a signal for the other unit that's right there. It's time to finally use it. The army throws fire bombs at the monsters. Unlike magic, it doesn't disappear when the damage ends. It just keeps burning. This makes the monsters roll on the ground desperately for an indefinite time. Moreover, those who are on fire become obstacles for the others. Now the plan is to push the enemies, and thanks to the fire, there is an obstacle between the different groups of monsters. Thus, they will have enough time before facing the next enemy. A soldier approaches the MC and says they are doing well, and the boy is happy about it. In that world, essential oils are rare and important items. Even so, he managed to acquire a good amount in the capital. Of course, all this was thanks to his father being a diplomatic minister, and he used the man's name to buy, but it was better than dying. Far from there, Mazel is about to use his plan. The idea is to destroy one side of the boss and take advantage while she is recovering to finish off the rest. However, they need to act very quickly. The problem now is that they don't know which of the demonic parts in front of them represents the true monster. They try to figure out which one seems to be more protected by her, but even so, they can't reach any conclusion. Mazel explains that he plans to attack the one in the middle, and then the ones on the sides will come towards him. The idea is for his group to help him by exterminating the rest. If his suggestion works, the central creature should lose its mind, and he will defeat it in one blow. If everything goes wrong, one of his companions should throw a potion at him. His companion agrees, but says that if he notices the situation is too out of control, he should focus on protecting himself first. Finally, the time to attack arrives, and the group prepares. When Mazel attacks the central creature, she says he has boring moves, but soon realizes the situation is out of control, and everyone fulfills their part of the plan. As she dies, the creature starts laughing, and the young man is outraged by this. She says that while the hero wastes his time there, her babies are annihilating all the kingdom's soldiers, so when Mazel returns, nothing will be left. The hero is outraged by this and violently grabs the creature. The monster says that this is a beautiful opening for the demon lord's rebirth. His companions don't hear that dialogue and therefore don't understand what's happening. Mazel is already desperate and shouts for them to return as quickly as possible. On the battlefield, Verna gives it her all. The pressure from the enemies doesn't seem to improve even though they've come so far. It's very difficult to escape from monsters. They don't even know where they're coming from. The situation is becoming confusing, and the MC no longer knows how to proceed until suddenly something happens. He shouts that it's time and orders everyone to advance, pushing the enemies. The soldiers don't understand, but Max believes the young man has a plan, so everyone follows his orders. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Hermine asks what's happening and is informed that reinforcements are on the way thanks to the return of the king's grandson. At that point, the expectation is that the enemies are too tired to fight. The dandy man grabs his sword and asks if the girl wants to accompany him. They go to the battlefield to have fun. The scene is thrilling and filled with monsters. Someone starts shouting that they won. Everyone approaches Verna and congratulates her on the victory. Verna feels she overdid it a bit and is about to collapse. He faints, but at least he remains alive. The MC has a terrible nightmare where he relives his older brother's funeral. He sees how cruel a person can be, to the point of being happy with another's death. All this in the name of joining a wealthier family. Out of nowhere, he wakes up desperate. It had been a while since he had a nightmare about his brother's funeral. It's strange that in the nightmare, there was the presence of his deceased brother's wife. Then he remembers he fainted in battle. A woman quickly enters the room, excited that Verna is awake, and says it's expected for him to feel terrible after pushing himself so much. She is angry and says everyone was very worried about the boy in the past few days. Not understanding the situation very well, he feels guilty, and the woman says she will treat his voice first since he needs it to give commands. Verna takes a healing potion. Apparently, he left everyone very worried. This reminds him of the first time he reincarnated, and he wonders if he was transported to another dimension again. Smiling, his mother tells him not to worry because this is a victory. Verna is relieved, because at least it wasn't a hallucination. His mother says that after the boy is well, he should tell his father everything he went through. The MC has a lot to say when he meets the man, but there isn't much space. The boy's father says he can't blame him for doing something that impressed the royal family so much. Now they want to see him personally. All the important families are about to visit them. In 5 days, he is also invited to receive a great award in front of the emperor. Verna bows before his father and apologizes for the problems he caused. The man is a bit disappointed with the boy but says everyone keeps talking about his heroic actions, and Verna did well. Then he asks if the boy is feeling better, and he confirms. His father talks about the essential oils the boy used and tells him to enjoy the time until the ceremony to rest and not go to school. Leaving his father's room, the butler says he's happy the master is well, and the MC agrees. Then, he asks the man to send a document. Many people died in that battle, and it's affecting Verna's mind a bit. The MC's intention is to write a letter of consolation to each of them and send them. The butler says he will prepare something that makes sense. The MC steps away and questions if he is human, as despite his colleagues having died, he is strangely calm. Verna wonders if he is treating that world as a game and that's why he feels so calm. Either way, if it is a game, those changes in scenery could negatively influence the hero's trajectory. Considering the duration of the battle, he cannot trust the Crown Prince's judgment. The man doesn't seem to know how to command his own guards. The MC remembers where the hero should go next, but he doesn't know if things will flow as they should. Verna begins to reflect on upcoming battle scenarios and preparation. Anyway, he is just an official civilian and has no power or preparation for a war. It would be interesting if he could talk to Max or the others to train the civilians in case they need to fight properly. Since they won the battle against the monsters, it's hard to awaken their sense of urgency. That is a world where individual bravery is admired, and many would probably oppose his fighting style. His first idea is to convince the group that it's necessary to establish a collective tactic. While Verna remains reflective, a young man appears and says he's there to represent him on that occasion. At the moment, the MC needs to resolve bureaucratic issues and recover. Anyway, he's happy not to have to go to school for the next few days. After some time, Verna and Mazel are training together. When the hero defeats the MC, he says he had mentioned wanting a casual competition. Teasing his friend, Mazel says he can be more careful with the battle hero. Smiling, the little boy says there are many rumors about his friend at school, and about his deeds during the battle. Apparently, everyone is impressed because Verna was able to predict the enemy's movements and traps. Moreover, His Highness gave him a great reward for his achievement. The MC feels uncomfortable because he's being given too much credit for that battle. Mazel comments that his friend's battle style is unique and never seen before. He fights like a porcupine. Suddenly, the hero places a pile of letters on the table, and Verna says it's been a while since he was invited to tea parties. But this time, it seems different. Several aristocrats asked Mazel to express their gratitude. Thanks to Verna, everyone there was able to preserve what they valued most. Although there were some losses during the battle, the families are eternally grateful to the MC. Verna takes the opportunity to ask if his friend was responsible for eliminating the boss. Laughing, Mazel says he doesn't know what would have happened if he hadn't managed to break the crystal the demoness used to control the monsters. The MC takes the occasion to ask if they discovered anything about the black crystal inside the creature, but Mazel says it's just an unknown stone until now. Verna wonders if that thing appears in the game at some point because he doesn't remember anymore. Joking with his friend, he says it's all thanks to the great hero, and the young man complains that he's being watched all the time. He only managed to escape that afternoon with the excuse of delivering the letters to the MC. Jokingly, Verna says he couldn't refuse the commander's position, so he's not a good example of how to refuse an aristocrat's request. Mazel reveals he's anxious about the etiquette rules for the victory ceremony the next day. In the end, Verna is not a good etiquette teacher, but he plans to help his friend, so he gives him some tips on how to act and dress for the occasion. The next day, at the ceremony, Verna gains the title of Viscount and is once again impressed with how things work in that world. The victory ceremony at the royal palace seems to be flowing slowly. At least, that's what the MC thought at the beginning. One by one, those responsible for that victory were called to the front. Until Verna acquired the title of Viscount, all the nobles there look at the young man with disdain. Despite that world being quite medieval, things seem to have modern formats, perhaps because it's a game. At a certain point in the ceremony, Mazel is called to the front. Verna wonders why he wasn't the first to be summoned. Observing his friend, the MC concludes that Mazel is truly handsome, as expected of a protagonist. The boy gets lost in thought and doesn't even notice when his friend receives congratulations. Later, Mazel finds him in the crowd and gives him a smile. More people are called for the ceremony. Eventually, the hero approaches the MC and says he did a good job. Verna comments that this is just the beginning of everything. All the nobles continue to stare at the boy as if they hate him. Mazel observes that since Verna is now a noble, he can help his father with work. But that's not what the MC wanted. It's too much obligation and bureaucracy. He would already be his father's successor due to his family, but now he has the obligations of a noble, something he doesn't want since he's just a student. From the MC's point of view, this is the worst possible situation. The boy understands that the more he gets involved in military activities, the greater his chance of dying in that game. A marquis calls Verna to congratulate him, and the boy apologizes for being rude during the battle. The man says it's all right, and His Highness has already talked to him about it. The bourgeois was afraid of losing his position as a marquis, but now he realizes he doesn't need to worry so much. His joy is knowing that the Count has a great heir in the family. For now, he will keep an eye on Verna's future achievements. After the man leaves, Mazel approaches and asks what just happened. The MC explains that he basically bypassed the Marquis when he spoke directly to the prince to alert him about the battle. In fact, he had to do this because he didn't have enough time to persuade the Marquis. But if you keep breaking rules like that, you're not able to maintain military discipline. Mazel finds it interesting because Verna is very knowledgeable about political matters, while he doesn't understand any of it. Hermione and her father approach the boy to praise his achievement. Then, they apologize for their behavior before the battle. The man acknowledges the boy's ability to command an army. The Marquis should apologize to his father, but that's an exaggeration, so he preferred to go to the MC. Relations between nobles are really a pain. Verna accepts the apologies because it's a courtesy in nobility. After this encounter, Verna reflects that Tyrone wasn't on the list of injured, so he should be at that party. But it might be impolite to ask about it. Hermione's father takes the opportunity to say that despite conflicts between their territories, he would like to have a good relationship from now on. Smiling, the boy says he hopes for the same. Hermione approaches and says she would love to discuss battle strategies with Lord Verna someday. Judging by their reactions, they no longer seem to see the boy as just a civilian. Seeing his friend with a worried expression, Mazel approaches and says he doesn't seem to be feeling well. The boy says that's true, but nothing compares to what the hero is dealing with. The nobles are eager to marry their daughters to Mazel, but the boy is trying to avoid it at all costs. Carefully observing the ceremony, Verna notes that it wouldn't even happen if the deaths predicted in the game had occurred. Of course, he doesn't think peace is a bad thing, but there are significant changes compared to the original version of the story. His hope is that the next stages follow the script. If that happens, of course, some people there will have to die. Even so, Verna doesn't believe he's a bad person for hoping for that. Mazel reunites with his friend, and they gossip a bit. Verna reflects that this is just the beginning of everything. He knows he needs to admit that he'll have problems if the next event doesn't happen. Of course, it seems true that power makes people selfish, as he can only think about his survival, but he doesn't feel guilty for what he's done in the last 10 years. A girl approaches, apologizing for interrupting their conversation. Noticing who it is, Verna automatically bows, but the girl says it's not necessary. The girl introduces herself as Laura, and the MC is shocked because that character's appearance should happen much later in the game. She is the heroine, Princess Laura, and asks if the duo would like to have a meeting with her. They follow the princess in absolute silence to a beautiful garden. Mazel comments to the MC that the girl is quite pretty. Joining the conversation, Verna says that perhaps being pretty is a prerequisite for becoming a noble on that continent. The MC observes that they are going too far into the palace, and this doesn't happen in the game, except when the kingdom is almost completely destroyed. They stop in front of a beautiful gazebo surrounded by nature. The prince appears and apologizes for disturbing the pair. That situation only frightens the MC even more. Now gathered are the prince, the heroine, the hero who is the protagonist, and him who is just a mob. It's strange because he shouldn't even be there. However, since he belongs to a royal family, the person who feels out of place ends up being Mazel. Even so, the boy seems relaxed. The prince says he would like to personally thank the two for their help in the battle. Mazel says it's unnecessary because he only helped by pure coincidence, and Verna comments that without the army, they wouldn't have succeeded. The boy starts talking to the princess, but she says he doesn't have to use formalities with her inside the palace. Then he says he didn't expect Princess Laura to be at the royal palace. He thought she would be at the great temple far from there. Of course, Verna knows that the temple was attacked by one of the 3 generals, so Laura meets Mazel face to face for the first time. At least, it should be that way. Now, he doesn't know if it's good or bad for the two to meet in that context. The prince says that Laura had a revelation through a vision and ended up going there. The oracle said that the demon king is back. Mazel asks if that's true, and the prince says the oracle is very real. Even so, they still don't have enough information to understand what's happening. The stories tell that the kingdom that existed years ago was destroyed by the demon lord, and today only its ruins remain. Many believe it's all just a fairy tale. The princess begins to explain that there are different levels of oracles, and those who can identify them are the only ones capable of understanding. In any case, this time the oracle is of a high level, and that's why she personally went to the royal capital to alert them. Verna reflects that maybe the king doesn't believe much in it, but the prince does. The only thing the MC doesn't understand is why they called him and Mazel. Looking at the boy, the princess says that the oracle also said that the one with the hero's ability would have a crucial role in the future. That's why she wanted to invite him too. In that world, the hero is identified by his rare ability, which makes him capable of defeating the demon lord. Verna begins to understand the situation better and just doesn't understand why he was called there too. So he questions the prince about it. The prince puts it plainly and says he called Verna to be Mazel's squire. Things start to make more sense. If a prince had died in battle, the return of the demon lord wouldn't be a reliable story. That situation is, in part, his fault. The man says he will do his best to find out if the demon's return is true or not, but he would like to keep Mazel close. Even with the change in the initial script, Verna is happy that the royal family still recognizes the hero as responsible for defeating the demon king. Mazel says he doesn't quite understand how this squire talk would work, and Verna explains to him that it will be his duty to protect him. Apparently, he needs to avoid getting close to so many nobles who keep harassing him. In the future, this could cause difficulties in a battle. The prince agrees and says that's why Mazel was pointed out as a possible subordinate of Verna. To try to end that mess, he formally refuses the proposal. He is a friend of Mazel and doesn't want to change the relationship they have to something between a subordinate and a superior. The MC's biggest fear is dying in the end because of political problems. The prince says they can continue being friends and maintain a hierarchical relationship only for formality's sake. Even so, Verna is determined to refuse. Faced with that refusal, the prince asks that at least Verna assist Mazel during his stay in the capital. Of course, he also wants to refuse this request, but he can no longer do that, and it's better to help him in the city than on the battlefield. In the game, the hero goes out to face the demon without money even for good armor. The more equipment, the greater his chance of victory, so maybe that change was good. The prince concludes the meeting by saying he would love to work more closely with Mazel from then on. The meeting ends, and Verna reflects that maybe his friend didn't have time to prepare since he spent the last few days worried about his schoolmates. Being your equipment or social life is much better than being a friend of someone who bears the burden of being responsible for life on Earth. When the prince leaves, the princess apologizes for her brother being rude, and Verna says it's all right. Mazel threatens to say something, but his friend comments that it's unnecessary. Looking more closely at the situation, the MC notices that the meeting between the heroine and the protagonist might be a chance for the two of them and stands up, saying he needs to go to the bathroom. Verna says she'll leave the rest of the discussion in Mazel's hands. His friend seems completely desperate, but he doesn't mind. Then he asks one of the staff to guide him to the bathroom. He wants to see the progress in the connection between the princess and the hero. Although it's a bit early, they need to start establishing a relationship. Besides, the princess seems quite receptive and friendly. Of course, the course of the story has changed a bit, but the outcome shouldn't have altered too much. At least that's what the MC hopes. The prediction is that the royal capital will be attacked and the palace will be partially destroyed. Both the knights and the staff there will be killed in the process. Some girls approach Verna and express their gratitude to him, but the boy doesn't understand why they're doing this. The girl reveals that her father belongs to the royal guard and said it was thanks to the boy that they won the battle. The MC gets nervous after that display of gratitude. While washing his hands, he reflects that he's very grateful that the water distribution and treatment system in that place is quite functional. The game doesn't mention any bathrooms, so he was very happy when he found the first one. It would be interesting if a world like that had magic everywhere, but it doesn't seem to be the case, and that's why he had to fight so hard to gain some power. Verna has done her best in recent years to ensure her survival. Even so, sometimes she thinks she could have done more. He ends up noticing that he doesn't value other people's lives much, and maybe that's because he still thinks it's just a game. Even so, those knights, the staff, Mazel, and the other students all seem real and full of relationships. Verna doesn't believe she'll be able to handle all that and thinks Mazel won't either. In the end, maybe her actions haven't changed anything. Anyway, she believes she did the best she could and doesn't feel guilty about it. Although the women were grateful to her, she didn't do anything for others. She just thought about her own survival and ended up saving some lives. But if her actions to survive were useful to the people around her, maybe she should consider doing it more often. Of course, she's not as good as Mazel in terms of combat and isn't envious of his skills, but she knows the game and has influence in the nobility of that world. Besides, she can't leave everything in her friend's hands. So, she plans to do what she can, and maybe it's okay to add another goal besides surviving. The princess talks to the hero, saying that he and Verna seem to be quite close. The hero looks at the girl and says he wants to ask her a stupid question. She is willing to answer whatever the boy wants, if she can, and he asks why Verna refused to be his subordinate. If Mazel became Verna's knight, it would take a burden off his shoulders, and if the royalty plans to eliminate the demon lord, he would accompany him without a problem. Even so, Verna refused the invitation even when the prince offered it. The princess says her brother was trying to test Verna. She believes that the resurrection of the demon king is true, and it's also true that only Mazel's power can save them. If the boy became Verna's knight, then the Lord would have great power. Of course, she doesn't think the MC would put himself above others, but not everyone believes that, including her brother. They understand how all that politics works, and everything went well in the meeting between Verna and the prince, but that's just what she thinks happened. Maybe Verna just wanted to preserve the friendship he has with Mazel. She confesses that she also has some friendships where she doesn't like to establish a hierarchical relationship. The pair of lovebirds stays there gossiping for a while longer. After stalling, Verna returns to the meeting with the princess and her friend, and they are laughing and talking nonsense. Mazel talked about the antics they do at school, and the woman now wants to know everything. They spend the rest of the time gossiping in the gazebo, enjoying the moments of peace. A few days after the ceremony, Verna learned that he would not have peace at school. But now there's a noblewoman trying to flirt with him. In fact, there are several of them. The school is like a miniature of noble society, so it's not strange and things are set up to work out. True love is a privilege those noble girls won't have, and he knows the girls only approach him because their parents told them to. It's not that he doesn't feel sorry for her, but he's already tired of the situation. At that moment, the MC finds himself locked in a room alone with that girl and doesn't know what to do. Suddenly, one of his classmates appears. Promptly, the MC's friend makes up an excuse to be there and asks the girl to leave for a bit. When the girl leaves, Verna thanks his classmate for helping him. Apparently, the teacher is talking to Mazel about the demons. The whole situation always worries Verna, but he tries to stay calm. While carrying a statue through the school, Verna and his bodyguard talk about how he should start a relationship with someone there, but the young man isn't interested. He reflects that he doesn't have time for that, and considering how marriages are viewed in nobility, he plans never to go through it. The MC takes the opportunity to ask where they are taking that sculpture, and the blonde says it's just an excuse to get out of there. and they can take it to the room. In the classroom, Mazel sighs, saying he can finally relax. Verna can hardly wait for the end of the day's class. He believes that after returning to the dormitory, things will calm down a bit. Verna tells the hero that if something happens in his dorm, he can come to his, because he will leave him a key. The hero says that's an exaggeration, but Verna insists that neither of them has been sleeping well in recent days. In the end, Mazel accepts the key and keeps it, saying he will use it if necessary. Verna doesn't see anything unusual, but he wants to ensure, after all, it's normal to enter an ordinary person's room, but they don't enter the nobility's room. The two friends gossip about their latest experiences while attending class. Then, Mazel says he wants to introduce Verna to someone who helped him in battle. In the original game, the hero completes his mission accompanied by only one person, but this time he was in a group of 4. Verna says he doesn't mind meeting the person, but wants to know how many there are. His friend is happy and says it's just one person he can trust. Now things seem to be following the game's script. That person is responsible for helping Mazel defeat the Demon Lord, and there's no reason not to meet him. The duo also has other things to discuss at another time. When the bell rings announcing the end of the class shift, Mazel gets up to fulfill the agreement and jumps out the window to leave. Meanwhile, Verna takes advantage of his classmate's distraction to slip away. After Verna arrives home, he is greeted by his butler, who is as friendly as ever. The MC talks to a man who will prepare a list of what he needs to carry out his tasks. His father hasn't returned home yet. As they walk through the corridors, the butler asks if the boy wants to leave a message for his father, and he says yes. Then, the old man asks what he wants to do that day and if he's going to have dinner, but Verna already has plans to train. This worries the staff, who ask the boy not to push himself too hard. After Verna locks himself in the training room, all the staff become agitated, tense about the boy's development. Then they set out to prepare delicious foods and teas that help him sleep. During training, Verna reflects that there doesn't seem to be any problems in the castle's business. The academy is also running smoothly. In terms of physical ability, no one can beat Mazel. Besides, he knows he can escape anything if he's in good condition. Even so, Verna knows Mazel will soon leave to eliminate the Demon Lord. Moreover, the presence of Laura and other characters is making him a bit worried. After Verna reincarnated and noticed that world was a video game, he does his best to preserve his old memories. He wrote down detail by detail and burned them afterward. He did this several times. So far, all the information has been very useful, and if things flow according to the game, they will continue to be. Even so, Verna doesn't know why he feels dissatisfied, and of course, he had several new experiences in that world. The existence of nobles and cities that weren't on the game's map, the presence of water supply and magical stones that hold power. This information was probably too much for the game's limited capacity. The stone that Mazel conceived from the demon seems to be an important object, but he doesn't remember anything about it in the game. In the end, he doesn't understand many things. The MC questions what kind of connection existed between his old world and that game. Of course, if he thinks too much about it, he'll end up freaking out. So, he tries to push the idea away. Maybe he needs to relax a bit more and commit to any connection that arises. Anyway, no matter how long he thinks about it, he won't understand. And as the situation progresses, the number of things he'll have to worry about will only increase. Therefore, he needs to resolve everything that needs to be resolved as soon as possible. First, he needs to get permission to form a group of merchants who will be responsible for bringing the equipment Mazel will use on his mission. For this, he will have to write a letter to his father, and His Highness MC also needs to study more. And thanks to his new position in the royalty, he has access to more documents. In any case, the boy cannot rush things and needs to wait for meetings to occur naturally. Verna is completely lost in his thoughts and obsessions when a woman calls him. Since the boy isn't paying attention, she ends up having to shout. The woman is angry and says he should take it easy that day. The MC apologizes for being so immersed in training, and his mother tells him not to worry the servants, since what his mother says is an order. The boy quickly goes to take a bath. There are many things Verna doesn't understand, but one is very clear. No matter what world you're in, facing your mother is always scary. At Hermine and Tyrone's house, the siblings talk about the need to train because they don't know when the next battle will be. The girl takes the opportunity to say she heard he was appointed for the reconstruction of the Valiza forts. The children's father told Tyrone that he should meet the Marquis responsible for the construction as soon as he arrives. Then he asks if Hermine wants to go with him. The girl questions if the legitimate child will be there, and Tyrone confirms. Then Hermine says she'll go if she has some free time. Next time, they will certainly have several things to resolve. Verna is taking advantage of that peaceful time to train his soldiers along with Max. As soon as the MC gets off his horse, Max says he needs to train the animal better and improve his attacks. The man gives a hearty laugh after saying that another guy, Serato, appears saying he'll be Verna's opponent that day. The scene is exciting, and the muscular guy ends up defeating the MC. Of course, Verna is happy that his knights are so strong, but he needs to improve a bit. At least the boy is happy that his soldier takes the battle seriously and the training as well. Barcy appears with a cloth for the MC to wipe his face and starts giving him fighting tips. Later, the MC questions if he'll never be able to win because he's an ordinary person, but since his opponent was a trained knight, maybe that's natural. Despite everything, being an ordinary person gives him the possibility to do more things, so it's not like he's envious or frustrated. This is a gift, but his training time won't be reduced in the end, so he'll do his best. In a tavern, Mazel introduces Rugens to the MC. When Verna responds normally, he agrees that the hero was right, and despite the boy being a noble, he doesn't act that way. Verna remembers that he was a character who hated nobility, so keeping in touch with him by being friends with Mazel is the best possible way. Rugens says he's heard about him through Oliver, but meeting him in person is quite different. The MC remembers Oliver, the mercenary who helped a lot in the battle and received a great reward for it. Anyway, it's not strange that Rugens and Oliver know each other, as their world is close, mercenary, and adventurous. Then, Rugens comments that Oliver said Verna is an excellent spearmaster that impresses the boy. He thanks and asks the adventurer to pass on his gratitude. Since Oliver isn't the type of person who gives compliments easily, the praise he gave must be true. Now, the MC should be more confident in himself. Rugens has the weapon mastery skill, allowing him to fight with any weapon. Although he's not on the same level as Mazel, he ends up being second in line for physical attacks. Now Verna understood why that character is so popular among players, regardless of gender. Rugens comments that the boy is different from what he imagined. Then, he changes the subject and says they should order something to eat and drink. The man says that Mazel mentioned they should be introduced, but didn't specify the reason. There must be something happening that needs help, so he wants to understand what it's about. Mazel and Verna look at each other and tell the adventurer that apparently, the Demon King is reincarnating. Upon hearing that, the adventurer takes it as a joke, but the MC insists that it's quite serious, and Rugens questions why they are discussing it in that place. Verna comments that if they went to a noble's house, it would attract too much attention, so it's better to discuss it in a popular tavern. Rugens asks why they want his help, and Verna says she would like him to join forces with Mazel. Of course, they are not yet sure of the information they have obtained, but if it's true, the hero will be sent to defeat the Demon King. As Mazel's friend, Verna has been trying to help him and connect him with royalty, but since they still have no confirmation, things are complicated. So far, the hero is just a student with little experience, and what the MC is looking for is someone who can help the boy evolve. Mazel tells Rugens that he would like to learn from someone with a lot of experience and wants the guy to teach him. Smiling, Rugens says he will help him grow, which is expected according to the game's storyline. Of course, they need to keep the whole situation discreet and casual, so they want to know where to start. The MC pulls a paper from his pocket and places it on the table, saying he would like them to take a look at it. The papers are full of incomprehensible scribbles, but Verna says they shouldn't find it scary. They just need to listen because he will explain. Rugens understands after the explanation that Verna wants to dispatch a merchant to get equipment. The boy says he knows that high-quality materials are sold on the continent, so he wants help with recommendations for adventurers and mercenaries who can escort the merchants. But he questions how they will resolve the money issue, and Verna says that initially his family will cover it, but soon the state will handle it. The boy's father has already agreed to the idea since the prince asked him to do it. Looking at the paper on the table now, Mazel notices that it's a map and comments that he has never seen one before, and it's interesting that Verna managed to draw one. Maps are state secrets for military security, so it's not strange Mazel has never seen one. Verna used every fragment of information he had and sketched a map. The hero comments that the idea doesn't seem to come from a student, and the adventurer agrees. While constructing the map, the boy reflected that many cities are not mentioned in the game. Naturally, those places don't have much influence on what's happening there. The MC wonders if the only place where all the battles happen is the one governed by the demon. Verna takes the opportunity to give some specific instructions regarding the path they should follow on the map. The duo agrees that Verna's behavior and knowledge are very strange, but they accept it. Meanwhile, the ruined fortress of Veritza will be renewed and will be full of people, which in the game's scenario indicates that the first flag has been raised. The fortress in the game was being used, but they should have some time until the renewal. The group ends the meeting at that bar. In the end, no matter how much preparation he makes, everything will fall on the hero's shoulders, and there's nothing better than letting Mazel gain experience. The MC can't help as much as he would like, but he is willing to do everything he can for his friend. Saying goodbye to his friend, Mazel says he will meet him later at school. Meanwhile, in the royal palace, His Highness says that the fortress renovation will begin as soon as the Marquis arrives. The king questions if there is any information about the Demon Lord's resurrection, and his son says that some cities are in chaos, but the reason is still unknown. The prince takes the opportunity to say that the verification of the military and their power is going well. so there is no need to worry, and the king questions how things are going with the Viscount. The man says that Verna apparently has nothing to hide. He is a loyal friend. Moreover, the count seems to have no influence over him, and there has been no drastic change in his behavior before and after learning about the demon's resurrection. The king comments that this means it might be reasonable to trust the boy for now and questions about the hero, but they shouldn't have a problem with either of them. It is very important that they are taking some initiative at that moment, and the king plans to leave things in the hands of his son. He has no intention of integrating the hero into his household and has found it beneficial to act as an intermediary. The prince says he agrees but doesn't think this is the smartest choice for a noble. He notes that Verna is only a little older than his son and is not exactly ambitious. His family's past is impeccable, and it doesn't seem like a bad idea to keep him as a close advisor. The king says they should keep an eye on the young men, and the prince reinforces that the next day he will meet with the hero and continue with their plans. At that point, the young man wonders what the hero will bring him next time and is eager for it. Despite being careful, Verna can't remember everything about the map, but if someone finds it, it will be problematic. So the MC decides to involve only a few scribbles and not let anyone know what he is doing. Suddenly, to his surprise, the butler and his mother appear, asking if he is drawing. The woman approaches and asks if that is supposed to be a wolf, and the boy confirms. The boy's mother says he did well since she could recognize what the drawing was right away. The boy's father appears, and his mother calls him to see the drawing Verna made. When the man looks, he asks if it's a vase. Indignant with the criticism, the young boy grabs the paper and says he will practice more. The boy's drawing skills in that world are terrible, but maybe it's because he is still a child. But that situation means that even if he is a little careless, he won't be caught. In that world, the week also consists of 7 days, and each day suggests an action, which made him think that world was polytheistic, but that's not the case. That day is the day of nativity, and apparently, even the royal family takes a break on this day. The prince is talking to the boy about getting equipment from the merchants for the soldiers. The man asks if the MC can really get high-quality weapons, and the boy confirms. He knows that all the equipment in the capital is low level. On the other hand, luxury items, food, or clothes exist in abundance. Verna doesn't understand why the equipment from outside is so much better. Quality items in that world are found in tombs. The villages surrounding the ruins are responsible for selling the items collected from inside. In any case, the volume of objects is unknown. Perhaps the reason they never needed this equipment is that the soldiers there are extremely competent and powerful. Even so, it's a mystery that so few people know about the good equipment sold outside. The prince comments that he informed the marquis at the fortress in the ruins of Veritza about a possible attack by the demon army. The capital is not far, so the sooner they know any information, the better. The conversation ends there, and Verna leaves. The prince asks what his companions think, and they say that despite his age, one says the boy seems intelligent and his suggestions logical. The other says it depends on how things will work in the future, but thinks it's a shame the boy is merely the son of a count. The man observes that even so, it's complicated that high-quality items are being obtained that are not reaching them. If things are as good as Verna supposes, then they should take action and start excavating themselves. Meanwhile, Verna goes after the merchant and is immediately recognized by a boy who guides him. The boy leaves the MC there and says his boss will arrive soon. At that moment, he is happy that the continent has given him such a great reward for the battle. On that occasion, he is dealing with a smart merchant, so he needs to be cautious. But compared to dealing with a prince who can literally make his head fly off, it's relaxing. Suddenly, a person appears apologizing for the delay. The man introduces himself as Bierstedt, the representative of his market network. Then he says he never expected a Viscount to see him personally, and thanks him for his consideration in making a large order. He says he heard about the young man's incredible efforts in battle and comments that it was memorable. Finally, Verna says she is there to seek merchant training to create a caravan and, of course, will arrange for bodyguards. Bierstedt stops smiling and stares at the young man. This is not a normal request from a student, but now he is a Viscount, so he hands him a list of cities. He would also like the merchant to evaluate the items in each of those places, and the man takes the list to have a look. Confused, Bierstedt says that this is very unusual. From the outside, it really looks like he is trying to start his own business. Verna says that the last monster invasion was not like the previous ones, and the man says he knows. The MC says it was the demon's fault, and if they did it once, they could do it again. Verna reflects that merchants must know quite a bit about demons, so talking about it is not dangerous. After all, the man must have even heard about the rumors of the Demon King's resurrection. The boy explains that thanks to his hard work in battle, he is now seen as a military leader and wants to equip his people well. Quickly, Bierstedt smiles again and says he understands, and it makes sense that the royal family is expecting so much from him. Even so, it is not a simple task, and the cost will be high. Verna requests a limited amount of weapons initially and equipment and says she will cover the costs. Of course, she wanted to equip all the palace soldiers, but barely has money to equip the soldiers of her own house. For now, he wants to check out high-level equipment and acquire it. Later, he can rely on the continent's funds to prepare. Bierstedt asks if he can buy more items, and Verna says there is no problem if he uses the merchant's money. The truth is, if they start reselling that equipment there, they can make the kingdom stronger. Normally, high-quality equipment is only used by the nobility, but it doesn't make sense to preserve the equipment if there's no one left to use it. The merchant takes the opportunity to say that there are cities there he has never even heard of, and Verna says she will provide a map with authorization from Her Highness. The man looks at the young man and asks if he can keep a copy of the map, but the MC doesn't understand why he doesn't buy a map for himself. Maybe he is avoiding problems and going against the continent. Verna reflects that there is no proof that the equipment sold in the game exists in that world, but the other cities seem to be surviving the monster attacks well, and that must be because of the high-quality equipment they possess. The MC takes the opportunity to tell the man that even if he doesn't find the requested equipment, he will pay for his trip. As time goes on, the invasion of the demon army will only increase, and the number of safe trips they can make will decrease. If that happens, it will be difficult to explore for items outside there. At the initial moment, the number of equipment and magical items is unknown, as is the volume of monsters, and above all, at that moment, he is concerned with his own nation. The MC climbs into a carriage and asks to be taken to the Adventurers Guild. If the boy starts to overestimate his own power, he will bring defeat to his people. The receptionist welcomes Verna and asks what she can do for him. Then, the MC says he wants to hire some people, making the girl excited. Verna doesn't understand how such a beautiful girl can manage that guild, but maybe she only got that position because of it. He follows her to a place further back in the guild and is greeted by a strange person. The man asks what kind of business the boy wants to do. Then, the MC says it's an investigation mission. He wants to know the frequency of monsters and the safety of specific places. Because it's a large extension, it's hard to know how many he will need, but it will probably be about 20. Verna sits down and begins to explain what he plans, and that he intends to pay both the adventurers and the guild. Some time passes until he manages to clarify everything and finish the first stage of his plan. With that, when the escort returns, they will share with the guild all the information they obtain about equipment and cities as well as the distribution of monsters. Gathering all possible information is crucial to avoid future problems. The MC goes to the Mercenaries Guild and talks to the receptionist there. He says he is looking for protection for a caravan of merchants. The Adventurers Guild and the Mercenaries Guild are in the same building, but the difference between them is absurd. Adventurers usually work in small groups and are people who do all kinds of jobs, while mercenaries are often hired for combat. A good portion of mercenaries tend to organize into groups and seek long-term jobs, unlike adventurers who prefer quick tasks. Additionally, those mercenaries also like to take on multiple missions simultaneously to reduce travel time and work. Verna talks with the guild administrator about the service she wants. Including all the necessary personnel, there are about 150 people, but the MC says he will pay whatever is necessary for this. Guilds are well organized and provide all the rights an adventurer might need, such as funerals, family support, and retirement when they become debilitated. Of course, maintaining this entire system is not cheap at all, so they sell the materials acquired on missions, in addition to charging necessary fees. The mercenary leader asks about the selection of people. Verna says she is looking for Rugans and Oliver, and then the man is impressed. Apparently those people already have their reputation established there. Later, the MC goes to a tavern, and someone approaches the Viscount and says they heard he has a job for the mercenaries. Felix introduces himself and says he wants to talk about that business. The presence of that boy is a surprise to the Viscount, and he orders some food to serve them. He is a very young person but has already heard stories of the hero and is quite skilled. Despite his cute appearance and being a boy, the young man recognized the MC because he has that ponytail. Verna comments that she let her hair grow for 10 years, and Felix says it must be difficult to take care of so much hair. The boy becomes curious and asks what the Viscount is trying to do. Verna says she is organizing a trip to nearby cities to buy things they need. Observing Felix, the MC concludes that the little boy is very friendly and knows how to approach people. Even so, he is also good at stealing what you have in your pocket, so much so that he was expelled from the guild for it, and Verna questions what Felix wants. The little boy says he doesn't want anything in particular, but it's quite interesting. He remembers that in his past life, he dealt with employees with that personality. Then he asks if Felix is interested in taking a job, and the little boy asks what kind of job. Now Verna has his full attention. At that moment, he has a perfect escort by his side but doesn't know where to place him. The first option is to have him gather information in the capital, and the second is to send him with the merchant caravan. If they get the flying boots on that caravan expedition, they will be very useful after Felix joins the hero's team. So, Verna says she wants him to accompany the caravan's escort. The boy explains to the child that after the battle against the monsters in recent days, things have changed a lot. Felix doesn't seem interested in the job and says it will take too long, but the MC comments that he will be able to eat delicious things in various cities and can pay him very well. The proposal starts to become interesting. Of course, it will cost him a lot, but if he thinks of it as an investment, it's a low price to pay. Verna concludes the conversation, saying which day he should meet him at his palace. He says that if Felix is interested, he just needs to show up there. Then he gives him money, saying it's for the cost of his trip. Felix looks at the money and asks if it's not too large an amount, but the MC says no, and that it will serve as a guarantee of his sincerity. The MC gets up from the table and says it's time to go. As he is leaving the tavern, Felix runs towards him and thanks him for the opportunity. That situation leaves him with a good impression of what's to come. Finally, the marquis responsible for the fortress has arrived. Of course, it's been a few days, but since then, everyone has been very busy with formalities. That prevents people from working normally. He even thought that this change in the scenario might cancel the fort's renovation, but he's happy that's not the case. Perhaps it's the action of a corrective force, which serves to realign the flow of history. If that's the case, it means even the people he saved at the beginning are doomed to die. If that happens, it will be a big problem. Of course, they are the ones with the greatest protection from the knights and the strongest defense, so they should be fine. Even so, the fact that he is alive and has changed the flow of history makes him think that perhaps it's a bit problematic. The MC also doesn't remember having seen or heard of the royal family before that initial battle. Additionally, he has memories of the second princess, Laura, and the king, even before meeting them, but he doesn't remember anything about the first princess. Perhaps this will change if he meets her in person, and that might be the strength of that game. But if that were the case, he should at least know the name of Marquis Knipe, but he has never heard of him before. Verna can't ignore his instincts, even if he's busy, but he does everything he can. When the mercenaries arrive, Verna introduces himself to them and thanks them for coming there. The MC's family assistant, Mazel and Rugans, introduce themselves as well. Oliver, Avant, and Felix also introduce themselves. Mazel and Rugans explain the current situation in the capital and its surroundings, surrounded by creatures. They thought they were leftover monsters from the last battle, but that doesn't seem to be the case. They are different enemies. Avant explains that this matches what he heard. Previous merchants had never seen monsters near the capital. Verna comments that the situation is becoming more concerning than he imagined, and the caravan will be a bit dangerous. But they have to be prepared. Oliver seems calm and says it's not a problem. They just need to be more careful than usual. Felix says that the danger doesn't bother him either. He just needs to be careful not to get caught. Mazel asks the MC if he trusts Felix's abilities and if it's safe to take that boy with them, but Verna says it is, and the hero feels more at ease. Looking at Felix, he comments that the boy seems happy, and then explains the situation. When he reached the MC, he was looking for a job because there is a child in the orphanage who is very sick, and no one has money to pay for medicine or a doctor. But thanks to the money Verna gave him, he managed to resolve the situation. That's why he owes the Viscount and decided to come there. The MC says he understands the situation, but doesn't want the little boy to think he owes him anything. Even so, the person who worries him the most is Avant, who says he has no problem with the situation. He says that if the path is difficult and dangerous, then the equipment can be sold for an even higher price. Now it's time to organize things, and Verna shows them a paper indicating who was sent to nearby cities for the escort. Rugans is astonished to see the names of some acquaintances on the list and questions the MC about it. Verna says that if they want to make any changes, there is still time, but the man says there's nothing wrong. The young man explains that the escort will check various things to make the path easier, and if the situation seems difficult, they should change the route. But Oliver wants to know who has the final say. Normally, the person responsible for this would be Verna, but in his absence, he will send his loyal employee. Verna notices that Avant is staring strangely at the map he made and takes the paper back. The boy says that the purpose of that caravan is to prepare the army in case the monster invasion becomes more complex in the future. Of course, that's the superficial reason, because if people widely knew about the Demon Lord, the situation would turn into chaos. The group begins to discuss the current situation of the royal capital and the risks they are facing if the demons move. They are worried about the danger to the city, but all Verna can do is talk to His Highness, which he has already done. Now they just have to wait for the commander to take them seriously. They need to know that unexpected things can always happen, so he wants to share a course of action for the worst possible scenario. Verna says that even if they hear that the fort was attacked or taken, they shouldn't rush back to the capital. They should return only when they have completed most of the mission. Oliver questions why this decision was made. The MC explains that it will be a problem if the weapons are confiscated in the name of the fort. If recovering the fort were simple, he wouldn't mind, but the enemy must have a well-structured plan. Moreover, the invasion of the fort would only be the beginning of the plan, which means they would then advance to the capital. Everything is being planned to ensure that Mazel is in the right place at the right time. He needs to be seen and recognized as the true hero. Mazel is troubled by the situation and would like to prevent the fort from being taken. The MC makes a point to remind that the military officer responsible for the fort is a noble known for his power. At that point, the hero is just an ordinary student with a rare ability, so no one would give him enough power to protect the fort. If all goes well, they will find a good reason to incorporate him, but until then, Mazel won't be able to use his abilities freely. Of course, Verna feels sorry for the commander and the others and would like to save as many soldiers as possible, but she needs the fortress to be taken. Verna and Mazel discuss a bit about the fortress's security, and the MC concludes by saying he hopes he understands what they are talking about. If people knew that Verna has property and knowledge about what is about to happen, everyone would be disappointed in him. Even so, if he revealed that he knows the future, it would only raise a lot of questions. Verna tells his friend that they are not gods, so they can only do what is within reach. He comments that it's getting late, and if there are no more questions, it's time to start the day. Before leaving, the hero asks to talk to Verna. The boy says he knows that most nobles are not like the MC. Mazel is excited to become stronger. Verna tells Mazel that he will be fine, and the boy is calm. He just tries to remind his friend that he can't keep skipping school. One of their classmates is outraged that there's no one to explain to him how social policies work. Changing the subject, the MC comments that the caravans are almost ready. After that, his friend leaves. Apparently, Verna managed to worry his colleague, but of course, that happened. After all, he's still just a student, and maybe should go back to attending school. On the neighboring continent, a giant creature invades and attacks several citizens. A demoness appears ready to annihilate everyone in her path. In a hall, there is a meeting among the nobles when an employee appears desperate. He explains that one of the cities was brutally destroyed after a demon attack. Moreover, there are monsters being led by demons, and they talked about the resurrection of the king. At home, Verna reflects that if he uses the carriage, he won't arrive at the academy in time. His plan is to try to fulfill his obligations as soon as possible to arrive in time for the third period. A clumsy employee of Verna enters and spills a drink on the young man's clothes. She starts apologizing, desperate. A well-dressed boy enters the hall, saying it's a shame the Viscount got wet so early in the morning. Even so, Verna doesn't mind and says it's no problem, but the boy continues talking nonsense and says he also received the title of Viscount. The MC reflects that the fact he is on the same level as the boy makes things a bit difficult since he can't ignore or treat him poorly. To save the young man, Hermione suddenly enters the room and tells Verna that her father wants to talk to the Viscount about recent events involving the demons. The square-jawed guy is indignant and says if that's the case, he's leaving, and Hermione is happy about it. The MC takes the opportunity to thank the girl for saving him from that unbearable guy. Then, she says it was nothing compared to the help he gave her during the battle. Smiling, Verna says that thanks to her, he will be able to get to school on time. The girl decides to stop taking more of the young man's time and lets him go. Later, her father appears asking what just happened. Hermione explains and says she's disappointed for not having managed to have a decent conversation with him. The girl's father places a hand on her shoulder to tell her some sad news. At school, Verna arrives late and with his clothes all wrinkled. Everything at school seems to be under control, and the boy doesn't know how he feels about it. Shortly after the battle, Mazel ended up overwhelmed with attention, mainly because many noble students left school due to the loss of relatives. Anyway, he's happy that the hero is finally following the path that will lead him to defeat the Demon King. The MC's colleague approaches him and says he can be more than just a student and help his friends. Mazel meets with Verna, and they start talking alone. Verna comments that it's hard for the boy to find free time, but Mazel doesn't seem bothered by helping his teachers and classmates. He questions if his friend doesn't take magic classes, and the MC responds that only the mandatory ones. Even in that world, with magic being something popular, he has no skill with the technique. Of course, even without magical skills, with a lot of time and practice, it's possible to master something, but studying magic can take a lifetime. That's why Verna gave up quite early. Mazel says he's not very good at magic either, but Verna says his friend is already powerful enough. The blonde boy mentions he was recently talking to Rugans, and they concluded it would be useful to have a healing mage on the team. So, our hero reflects a bit on that. Rugans, Mazel, and Felix do not master magic. From what the MC remembers from the game's story, before Princess Laura joins the hero's team, a supposed monk should join, and he would be able to use sacred magic. Verna cannot talk about what awaits the hero's team at that moment. Trying to escape that discussion, he asks them to gather as many healing items as they can and says he'll keep an eye on the skills of new candidates. For now, he should use recovery magic, and in case of emergency, he can use healing power. Mazel says that might work, but he can't manage many things at once very well, so depending on the situation, it might get complicated. To understand better, the MC asks if, with unlimited magic supply, he can use his power without pauses, and the young man confirms. Apparently, magic recovery potions are the most important. Verna starts having some wild ideas about manipulating magic potions to use them as attack bombs against enemies. A professor overhears the conversation and approaches, saying that's a very interesting idea. Mazel quickly introduces his friend to the professor. The man asks if that magic potion talk has anything to do with the topic they need to address, because if not, he wants to discuss another subject. But the MC confirms they are there to talk about that. The professor guides them to his modest office. Although he understands the MC's idea, there's no concrete proof that it could work. Verna decided to consult the professor because he needs to keep control over the magic. Things can get quite complicated depending on the power used. Managing the situation would be easier if their enemies were just beasts, but considering an attack on the capital and the resurrection of the Demon King, options are limited. Lately, Verna has been thinking about a possibility to manage the magic system. It's a world where military power has advanced significantly, and he doesn't understand why such a small group is sent to defeat the Demon King. When the young man remembers his past life and memories of that game, he realizes it would have been much more convenient if the army attacked all at once. Perhaps in that world, there's an explanation for such a small group being formed. The professor accesses his studies and concludes that information about the functioning of mana magic potions is quite scarce. Even so, there are some cases where people try to use these potions for attack, but the results are usually complicated. Verna is confused about the power that can be provoked if they accumulate magic in a single area. The professor says he usually teaches fire magic, and even when dozens of students use it simultaneously, there usually isn't any problem. But if the students are behind the same bench, there might be some injuries. Even so, these are things that can be treated with healing potions. The man concludes by saying that, in the end, it's just his personal experience. Since things don't always work that way, he can't say anything for sure. But if they can delve into what Verna is suggesting, they might have a significant breakthrough in understanding magic. And this will certainly benefit the school. The man says Verna should talk to someone from the court of mages and monks because they have research not available there. Considering there are things you can't talk about openly, they might like the MC's ideas, and the professor writes a letter that might help him acquire more information. Then he asks why the boy doesn't transfer to the magic department because that would be a brilliant research. When they leave the professor's office, Mazel comments that when he uses magic with Gentis, the intensity is very different from the magic used at school. But he never questioned it, and maybe it's because it's the real world, or because he got stronger. Verna has several hypotheses about that, thinking magic has a limit at a certain distance. In his old world, it would be like using a hairdryer, with the TV on and the heater too. Things will end up breaking. The things Verna is assuming seem to be concrete, and he will use the letter the professor mentioned to talk to those he needs to. The MC takes the opportunity to comment to Mazel that he only managed to speak with the professor thanks to his friend. The next day, his plan is to try to resolve the issue of the letter. Saying goodbye to his friend, Mazel asks him to let him know if he needs any help. Verna reflects that they have to prepare to avoid the destruction of the royal capital and cannot skip group combat training or anti-magic precautions. Confronting nobles like that day is avoidable, but he doesn't want to end up looking like a fool for suggesting group training. The boy spends his time walking through the corridors and thinking about tactics and training and combat strategies. Then, he decides that first he needs to prepare for the merchant's caravan. He is curious to know when he will return to being a normal student again. Now he has to manage goods, talk to important people, write letters, read books. Finally, the caravan sets off on its expedition. The announcement was made, the fall of the neighboring continent and the resurrection of the Demon King, and that happened a few days later. Verna's military is training hard, and everything is going well. Considering the current skill level of the military, they should be able to perform well in battles. When you defeat magical creatures, they leave behind magic stones, which can be used to craft items. Because they are expensive, they are not accessible to everyone. Verna observes that it would be much simpler if the rules in that world worked the same way as in his, but physics doesn't seem to fully apply there. Even if you take a magic stone from a monster, it will just be a stone if you can't use magic. Of course, just magical power is not enough, as you will only be able to control it with training. Verna wonders if magic can exist in places they cannot see. The young man wants to know how the recovery potion can restore magic and if this magic has a space limit. After having an idea, the MC goes to the royal castle. The young man's goal is first to make a proposal to His Highness regarding Fort Faritza. Then he goes to the Chancellor to talk about magic. Even though he is already used to that kind of situation, he still gets nervous. The recovery of Fort Varitza seems to be going very well and should be ready by the following week. Apparently, the responsible marquis is personally attending the site, which makes things move faster. After reflecting for some time, someone appears coming out of the prince's room and collects the scroll the young man has in hand. The prince apologizes for keeping him waiting. He asks Verna how the battle training is going, and the young man says they are making very good progress. This will probably work much better, but he doesn't know the benefit of carrying it near Fort Varitza and wants to ask the prince a question first. Verna wants to know how seriously the lord took the warning he gave him. Then the prince says that the person in charge didn't seem to believe much in the demon attack. Trying to resolve the situation, the prince asks what Verna suggests. Apparently, the young man already knows what he is going to say, and that's why he is leading the conversation that way. Even knowing everything, the prince wants Verna to speak in his own words, and that seems like a test. Then the MC begins to speak. He says that if they cannot complete the structuring of the fort, and the marquis is attacked by demons without being prepared, it will be difficult to protect against the demonic invasion. The prince agrees, saying that this happens especially because they have many common people involved in the repair operations. Even if the marquis takes the necessary precautions to fend off the attack, the knights will do well, but the common citizens will not and will panic. At that point, the number of normal people in the fort is much greater than that of soldiers, and they may need to direct their own troops to contain the chaos. Verna is saddened because at that point it seems that many people are underestimating the danger that is coming. The MC says that the best solution is to leave strong military forces near the fort to help when necessary. The second option is to prioritize evacuation and protect those who can escape. The prince is shocked that he does not plan to rescue anyone inside the fort, but Verna says that inside it will be a mess if attacked, and relying on the marquis to counterattack is very difficult. Even if they escape from the fort, Varitza is only half a day's journey to the capital, and there is a risk of them heading in that direction. Verna observes that the force outside the fort will need to hold the line on its own for some time. This way, they will be able to protect the civilians inside and give the military time to prepare. In this manner, both sides can help each other to control the situation. Even so, the MC remains afraid that the attack might be much better planned than he imagines, but he doesn't think it will be. If the monsters are so well coordinated in this way, they will attack the capital and the fort simultaneously, and in that situation, there's not much to be done. Of course, around the capital, there is a barrier that protects them from the monsters, but as in the game, it was completely destroyed, so it's not reliable. Considering the positioning that the demons have in relation to humans in the game, the expected behavior is that they will take the fort to try to pressure the humans. Verna is interested in helping everyone she can before escaping. The prince and the young man begin to discuss the future of the fortress and how to manage the situation. If the fort falls, people will not be happy with that situation, so the bourgeois' idea is to completely blame the MC if the place is attacked. His Highness is very excited about Verna's help in the battle. After a while, the boy goes to the Chancellor and the Royal Magical Court. The prince is also present at that moment. The researchers are very interested in the boy's theory. The MC begins to present his idea. According to his theory, as the magician uses his power, he starts to lose it. It would be as if there were a magic limit for each person. He would like to test if there are differences in usage on varied scales. For a person who wants to effectively implement anti-magic strategies, that part is crucial. If strong magic is prioritized when deciding magical allocation, the strategy will have to be different from what he imagined, but they won't know until they test it. The Chancellor and his companion suggest that they test this with some people to understand how it works. Later, the Chancellor questions the prince about where the boy's knowledge comes from. Of course, this may be thanks to his innate abilities, but he is quite different from his father. The prince observes that in that situation, placing all his expectations on Verna's shoulders is not a good idea, so he suggests calling the Duke. The Chancellor agrees that it's important to call the Duke because he will be very useful, but they cannot dismiss the boy. Apparently, Verna's behavior is very reminiscent of the Duke's. These two eccentric people will help them a lot in the upcoming chapters. Felix's group is facing monsters out there. The number of creatures is much larger than expected, and the battle is not easy. Felix concludes that something is out of the ordinary, and something catches his attention. Sometime later, one of the young men will send a message from Felix to the caravan. There is a group of mercenaries in the forest hunting monsters. When they see the merchant's cart, they decide they can attack it to steal whatever it carries. When they stop in front of the cart, they demand that everyone drop their belongings, but they end up being caught by surprise. The whole group is gathered, and Oliver says they need to follow orders and not kill anyone or let them escape. Then they advance into battle and take down all the bandits. After the hard work, Verna's butler serves them tea. They are all happy with the teamwork and surprised that Verna has been able to prepare them so well for this. Avant is glad they are having the opportunity to test the weapons they found, and when they sell them, they will already know their potential. The The next time the bandits attack them, the armor should be enough to protect them. The group begins to worry about how things are getting out of control regarding the volume of monsters. Even so, they are relieved to have acquired that armament for Verna, because they will be able to resolve the situation. South of the royal capital, Verna is fulfilling her military duties. Rhinish and Hermine are happy to be able to work with the boy. Another viscount named Avon introduces himself to the MC. Verna recognizes his house and realizes that his father died, so he had to take on the role. Avon comments that thanks to Verna's skills, they were able to establish strategies and battle plans. Hermine appears again, more excited than usual, to be guided by the MC. Rhinish says he is admired for being able to guide so many men, besides being involved in magic experiments. The entire military group is mounted, and they seem ready for the situation. Meanwhile, the mages are practicing to test their power. Verna sees the power of the mages and wonders if it is distributed randomly. The destructive power of the mages is impressive as expected. Now they must begin the second experiment. Verna organizes them to get ready. When all the units are in their proper places, they activate their magical items. The test is a complete success. The bearded one asks the responder to send the experiment results to the base. The MC wonders if it's okay to talk about such a sensitive topic there, as they just discovered that there are 2 types of magic involved in the spell. But if the person in charge says it's okay, then it should be trusted. Perhaps he wants to see how people will react to that proposal, or maybe he trusts his group a lot. Verna explains that if the hypothesis is correct, consuming a large amount of mana at once will affect the activation of the magic. Initially, the experiment was designed to test this. They wanted to see if mana had any kind of preference. Thus, they activated a large number of magical objects that consume a small amount of mana. Then they tested spells that consume a large amount of mana and, subsequently, things that save energy and magical power. In this way, they can devise attack strategies and prevent power throughout the battle. Of course, other factors can influence the final result, but so far, he has a vague answer. That discovery is entirely Verna's merit, and the mage makes a point of emphasizing this. In the last battle, the large volume of goblins trying to use magic simultaneously made it so that no one could use it properly. Once you have the catalyst, ideas come one after the other. Now the MC wonders why no one noticed that before. The military there find the idea the young man had incredible and are amazed by his insight. In any case, that technique is fundamental to neutralizing areas of magic effect during the defense of the royal capital. Until then, they assumed that the lack of efficiency and magical power against the enemies was due to their resistance. Now they know the answer. That world greatly values individual power, so it's natural that they focus on improving attack and defense. Even so, the mages there are quite intelligent. Hermine appears out of nowhere, asking where Verna got that idea. The young man begins to explain where his theory came from. He continues to reflect on how that world values individual power. This kind of behavior can make the importance of the hero only grow, which is very bad for Mazel. In a village in the royal territory, a young woman is looking for something. She opens the door and is greeted by Lily. The woman brought food for Lily in gratitude for her help. Apparently, she is an artist keeping an eye on the hero. She hopes Mazel feels more confident when he sees a picture of her. Someone suddenly shouts Lily's name, and the woman has to leave. The woman's friend leaves, and she locks herself in the house. The hero is Lily's son, and the situation is very complicated in the village. Then she takes a letter and reflects on the idea of drawing a picture of the family to send to Mazel. They conducted tactical groups and performed magic checks to prepare for the battle. Due to the training being done individually in some cases, they end up fighting each other. The reputation of knights in that world is really something very delicate and involves capturing enemies. At least in that training, many of those present experienced a real battle. Of course, most are only there because they received orders from the ruler, but it's important to feel that things are changing. If they continue changing people's minds to develop group operations, people and knights will start to yield. Verna announces that she will have her soldiers set an example. They start the battle and are in perfect sync. The group that the MC trains is really impressive thanks to their skills. The soldiers are exhausted after the intense training, and it's time to rest. The next day, they will start again. Before everyone is dismissed, Hermine and Verna are assigned to deliver supplies to nearby villages. The MC wonders why those two were chosen, but since they are close neighbors, it shouldn't be too strange. Hermine goes to talk to him and says she's looking forward to working with the young man the next day. Early in the morning, she is already putting on her armor and preparing for battle. A woman approaches and asks if something happened. Noticing that the situation is becoming very personal, Hermine asks her maids to leave. The soldier apologizes to Sophie for making her worried, but the woman questions what is happening between Hermine and the Viscount. Apparently, she is spending a lot of time by his side, and that worries her. Hermione explains that her father told her what happened between her house and Verna's. Sophie knows the story of the law of Judith and Viscount Verna, as well as the accident that happened when they were still students. Family gossip is overwhelming, and Hermione says she thought the marriage between the houses didn't happen because of the age difference between her sister and the Viscount. But the reason wasn't that simple. After the Viscount's older brother passed away, it was he who asked to leave that marriage. Apparently, age wasn't the issue. What happened was that she didn't want to marry a common civilian. Sophie tries to say something, but Hermione comments that she feels indebted to the young man. She isn't sure if he knows, but it seems like he does. Thinking from that perspective, his behavior makes perfect sense. During the terrible accident that happened, the Viscount was concerned with saving their lives, and even gave her advice. At that point, Hermione only feels embarrassed about what happened. On top of all that, the Count still ordered her to get closer to him. That is a senseless demand, but the girl has no choice but to do what she was told. Even so, considering she is the sister of the woman who drove Verna away, he probably doesn't want to see her even if she were painted in gold. Sophie tries to explain that Hermione and Judith are very different, but the girl knows that, to the MC, she is nothing more than her family. Verna arrives at the village with military demands, and the citizens there accept them calmly. The men say they don't have many supplies there, and the young man explains they will only take what is necessary, then asks if there is a stream nearby. They give him vague directions on how to get there. Water is a very problematic issue for them, as they are in constant and intensive physical activity, needing at least 3 liters per day. Considering the 300 participants, that's about 900 liters per day. And there was no way to bring all that from the capital. That's why they have to keep going to villages to find water. Verna asks the citizens how they would like to be paid, and the man responds with gold coins. They even have the audacity to ask for extra for the inconvenience. Verna says he will take that into consideration.